The crystal spires of Zephyria Prime gleamed like frozen lightning against the purple sky as Ambassador Jonathan Cross stepped off the diplomatic shuttle. The Valdorian honor guard stood at attention, their scaled skin shimmering in the alien sunlight, pulse rifles held with military precision. To any observer, it looked like a standard diplomatic welcome for the human representative to the Galactic Council. Cross adjusted his formal diplomatic robes, the dark fabric concealing the lean, dangerous frame beneath. His gray eyes swept the landing platform with practiced calm, cataloging exits, cover positions, and potential threats. Old habits died hard, even after 15 years in diplomatic service. Ambassador Cross, hissed General Vexstar, the Valdorian military commander, his forked tongue flicking between razor-sharp teeth. The Supreme Chancellor awaits your presence in the negotiations chamber. Cross nodded politely, following the escort through the ornate corridors of the Imperial Palace. Holographic displays showed the might of the Valdorian Empire, star destroyers that could crack planets, armies numbering in the billions, conquered worlds spanning 3 galactic arms. The message was clear: humanity existed at the Empire's mercy. The negotiations had dragged on for 3 days. The Valdorian Empire wanted humanity's mining colonies in the Outer Rim, offering protection in exchange for exclusive rights to extract rare earth elements that powered their war machine. Cross had stalled, requested communications with Earth, and generally frustrated the Imperial delegation with bureaucratic delays. What the Valdorians didn't know was that Cross wasn't stalling, he was studying them. Every guard rotation, every security protocol, every weakness in their seemingly impregnable palace. The diplomatic corps had chosen him for this mission not just for his negotiating skills, but for the very particular set of talents he'd possessed before joining the Foreign Service. Chancellor Mordun, a massive Valdorian with ceremonial scars covering his scaled hide, leaned forward across the negotiation table. Ambassador, your species has exhausted our patience. You will sign the mining rights treaty tonight, or face the consequences. Cross remained calm, his fingers steepled in front of him. Chancellor, I'm afraid I need more time to review the terms with my government. Perhaps we could schedule another session tomorrow? There will be no tomorrow, Mordun snarled. Your primitive species thinks it can dictate terms to an empire that has conquered 1,000 worlds. Tonight, you sign, or you die. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Cross had expected this moment. The Valdorians had grown tired of diplomacy. Their intelligence networks had missed one crucial detail about Jonathan Cross, former captain of the Terra Defense Special Operations Unit. Before he became a diplomat who could negotiate water rights with Martian colonies, he had been something else entirely. Very well, Cross said softly, his voice carrying an undertone that made the Valdorian guards unconsciously tighten their grips on their weapons. I accept your terms. But, as he reached for the data pad containing the treaty, his other hand moved with lightning speed. The ceremonial pen on the table became a weapon, its pointed tip finding the gap in General Vexstar's armor plating. The Valdorian dropped his sidearm, purple blood frothing from his mouth as Cross held him as a shield. Now, Cross said, his diplomatic mask falling away to reveal something cold and predatory beneath, let's renegotiate. The palace guards raised their weapons, but hesitated. Their general was held hostage by what they had assumed was a soft, weak human diplomat. Cross used their hesitation, his free hand drawing Vexstar's plasma pistol with fluid grace. You seem to have made an error in judgment, Cross continued, backing toward the chamber's emergency exit while keeping the dying general between himself and the guards. Your intelligence files on Earth are woefully incomplete. Chancellor Mordun's eyes widened as he began to understand. You're not just a diplomat. Cross smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Before I learned to negotiate treaties, I learned other skills. Your empire has many enemies, Chancellor. Some of them hired a specialist to eliminate certain problems. They called him the Baba Yaga. The recognition hit the Valdorian leader like a physical blow. Every species in the galaxy had heard whispers of the Baba Yaga, a human assassin who could walk through armies, topple governments, and vanish like smoke. The stories seemed too incredible to believe. A single human who had crippled the Nexus cartel, eliminated the Wraith Syndicate's entire leadership structure, and once depopulated an entire military space station without triggering a single alarm. Impossible, Mordun breathed.
The Baba Yaga is a myth.
Myths don't negotiate mining rights, Cross replied, releasing the now-dead general and diving through the emergency exit as plasma fire erupted behind him. The palace alarm system screamed to life, bathing the corridors in pulsing red light. Cross moved through the chaos with deadly precision, his diplomatic training and killer instincts working in perfect harmony. He knew the palace layout better than most of the guards. 3 days of careful observation had mapped every corridor, every service tunnel, every weakness. A squad of Valdorian soldiers rounded the corner, pulse rifles blazing. Cross was already gone, having melted into a maintenance shaft like he'd never been there.
From the darkness, the stolen plasma pistol spoke twice.
2 guards dropped, their armor smoking. The others opened fire on empty air. In the palace's central command center, General Kretios watched the security feeds with growing horror. The human diplomat was moving through their most secure facility like a ghost made of death.
"How many troops have we lost?" he demanded. 17 dead, 11 wounded, reported his aide. "He's heading for the armory. Seal it. Flood the corridors with gas. Bring in the hunter-killer droids."
But Cross was already 3 moves ahead. The gas vents had been his first target. A few well-placed charges from his diplomatic pouch had turned the palace's security system into his ally. The sleeping gas that should have incapacitated him instead poured into the guard quarters, dropping dozens of soldiers before they could respond. The armory's magnetic locks meant nothing to someone who had once infiltrated the Centauri maximum security prison.
Cross bypassed the biometric scanners with tools hidden in his diplomatic credentials, walking into the vault like he owned it.
Rows of advanced weaponry stretched before him.
Plasma rifles, graviton bombs, molecular disruptors, enough firepower to level a city block.
But Cross was methodical, taking only what he needed. This wasn't about destruction, it was about sending a message. The hunter-killer droids found him in Corridor 7, their sensors locked onto his heat signature. These mechanical nightmares had pacified 3 rebellions and could track a target through solid rock.
Against a human diplomat, they should have been overkill.
The first droid's head exploded in a shower of sparks before it could fire. The second managed to get off a shot, but Cross was no longer where its targeting computer said he should be. A graviton grenade reduced it to constituent atoms.
The third droid's artificial intelligence actually hesitated. Its threat assessment protocols couldn't compute what it was facing. In that moment of digital uncertainty, Cross struck.
The molecular disruptor he'd acquired from the armory didn't just destroy the droid, it unmade it on a subatomic level, leaving nothing but a shadow burned into the floor.
General Kretios stared at the empty corridor on his security monitor. "Where is he?"
His answer came from behind him. Cross stood in the command center's doorway, somehow having bypassed every security checkpoint, every locked door, every armed guard between the armory and the brain of the palace's defenses. "Gentlemen," Cross said, his diplomatic voice at odds with the weapons he carried, "I believe we need to discuss the terms of humanity's mining rights in a more productive manner." The Valdorian officers reached for their weapons, but froze when they realized the truth.
The human hadn't come to escape.
He had come to negotiate from a position of strength. Every dead guard, every disabled system, every impossible infiltration had been calculated to demonstrate a single, terrifying fact: if the Galactic Empire wanted to threaten humanity, they would have to deal with monsters wearing diplomatic credentials.
And some monsters, once awakened, were very difficult to put back to sleep.
The command center fell silent except for the hum of quantum processors and the distant wail of alarms. General Kretios and his staff stood frozen, their hands halfway to their weapons, as they processed the impossible reality before them. The soft-spoken human diplomat who had spent 3 days politely requesting communication delays now stood among them like death incarnate. Cross surveyed the room with professional calm, his gray eyes cataloging each officer's position, their weapons, their potential threat level. The molecular disruptor in his right hand hummed with barely contained energy while his left hand rested casually on a graviton grenade. "I suggest you order your remaining forces to stand down," Cross said, his voice carrying the same diplomatic politeness that had characterized their negotiations.
"We have business to discuss."
General Kretios, a veteran of 40 campaigns across the galaxy, found his voice first. You're insane if you think you can fight the entire Imperial Navy.
Cross tilted his head slightly, considering.
General, I've just neutralized your palace defenses, eliminated your elite guard units, and I'm currently standing in your most secure command center. Your assessment of the situation may need revision. The truth of it hung in the air like a blade. In less than an hour, a single human had done what entire rebel fleets had failed to accomplish. The Valdorian Empire's reputation for invincibility was cracking like cheap armor under stress.
What do you want?
Kretios asked, his tactical mind already calculating odds and finding them unfavorable.
Originally?
A reasonable mining rights agreement that respected humanity's sovereignty, Cross replied.
Now.
I want to discuss why the Galactic Empire thought it was wise to threaten a species that produces individuals like me. He gestured to the security monitors showing the devastation he'd caused. Bodies in scorched armor, disabled defense systems, and the smoking remains of what had been the Empire's finest military technology. The message was clear: this was what one human could do when motivated.
Imagine what billions could accomplish.
Chancellor Mordun's voice crackled over the command center's communication system. General Kretios, what is your status?
Cross moved to the control console with fluid grace, accepting the transmission. Chancellor, this is Ambassador Cross. I'm afraid the General is currently indisposed.
Impossible. Your sensors show exactly what I want them to show, Cross interrupted.
Which brings us to an interesting point.
Your intelligence networks have been compromised for quite some time.
The statement sent ice through every Valdorian spine in the room.
If the human was telling the truth, it meant their military secrets, their battle plans, their entire strategic framework had been laid bare to Earth's intelligence services. Cross continued, his tone conversational despite the devastation surrounding them.
Did you think humanity stumbled onto the galactic stage by accident? That we developed faster than light travel through pure luck? Chancellor, we've been watching you for decades.
He activated the command center's holographic display, showing star charts that made the Valdorian officers gasp in recognition. Fleet positions, supply routes, strategic vulnerabilities, information that should have been known only to the Empire's highest command levels.
The mining colonies you want so desperately? Cross smiled. They're not just extraction facilities.
They're forward observation posts, monitoring stations, and, in some cases, weapons platforms designed to look like industrial equipment. General Kretios stared at the display, his military training warring with disbelief.
You're saying Earth has been preparing for war this entire time?
Not preparing for war, Cross corrected. Preparing for peace through superior firepower. The same principle your empire built its reputation on, but with better execution. The command center's main screen flickered to life, showing incoming transmission signatures. Dozens of them, scattered throughout the galaxy. Cross had triggered a communications protocol that was now activating across human space. What have you done?
Chancellor Mordun's voice carried a note of genuine fear.
I've sent a very simple message, Cross replied. The Valdorian Empire has chosen hostility over diplomacy. Earth's response protocols are now active. The transmission signatures began resolving into actual communications. Mining colonies across the galaxy were shedding their industrial disguises, revealing military installations that dwarfed anything in the Empire's arsenal. Hidden shipyards in asteroid fields suddenly blazed with activity as vessels that had been disguised as commercial freighters transformed into warships. But the real shock came when the deep space monitoring stations began their reports. Human fleets, vast beyond imagination, had been hiding in the dark spaces between stars. Ships that made Imperial dreadnoughts look like shuttlecraft were moving into position around every major Valdorian world. This is impossible, General Kretios whispered, staring at the tactical displays. Our intelligence showed humanity as a minor species with limited military capability. Cross laughed, and the sound was genuinely amused. General, the first rule of intelligence gathering is that your enemy will try to deceive you. The second rule is that if they're good at it, you'll never know until it's too late. Chancellor Mordun's image appeared on the main screen, his scaled features twisted with rage and desperation.
Human. You cannot threaten the Galactic Empire.
We have allies, treaties, military pacts. Had, cross-corrected.
Past tense.
I'm afraid your allies have been receiving some very interesting intelligence about your empire's true military strength, your resource depletion problems, and your plans to use them as expendable troops in future conflicts. The command center's communication array lit up with incoming transmissions from across the galaxy. Former Valdorian allies were formally withdrawing from military pacts, trade agreements were being suspended, and, in some cases, species that had been conquered by the Empire were declaring independence. You see, Chancellor, the thing about ruling through fear is that it only works as long as you're the most frightening thing in the galaxy, Cross explained. The moment something scarier comes along, your entire power structure collapses.
The display showed the cascading failure of the Valdorian Empire's authority in real time.
Rebellions erupting on a dozen worlds, allied fleets refusing orders, trade routes shutting down as merchant species sought the protection of humanity's newly revealed navy. General Kretios slumped into his command chair, the weight of strategic defeat crushing his military pride.
What do you want from us?
Cross holstered his weapons, his diplomatic demeanor returning as if the past hour of violence had never happened.
The same thing I wanted 3 days ago.
A reasonable agreement that respects both our species' interests. He produced a data pad from his diplomatic pouch, the device somehow undamaged despite everything that had occurred.
I've taken the liberty of revising the Mining Rights Treaty. I think you'll find the new terms much more equitable. Chancellor Mordun's voice was barely controlled fury. You think you can dictate terms to us? We still have the largest fleet in the galaxy.
Actually, Cross said, checking his chronometer, that distinction now belongs to humanity. Our shipyards have been quite busy over the past few decades. But, your fleet is still formidable, which is why I'm offering partnership rather than conquest. The revised treaty terms appeared on the command center's displays. Rather than the one-sided extraction rights the Empire had demanded, it proposed joint mining operations, shared technology development, and mutual defense agreements. It was everything diplomacy should be beneficial to both parties, sustainable long-term, and backed by the implicit understanding that violating it would be extremely unwise. This is extortion, General Kretios protested.
This is diplomacy, Cross replied.
The difference is that now we're negotiating from equal positions rather than you trying to intimidate a species you assumed was helpless.
He gestured to the tactical displays still showing human fleets moving into position throughout the galaxy.
I could have led with this demonstration of strength. Instead, I came here hoping to reach an agreement through peaceful means. Your leadership chose a different path. The truth of it was undeniable. Earth had offered the olive branch first, sending a diplomat to negotiate rather than a fleet to demand. The Empire had mistaken diplomacy for weakness and nearly paid the ultimate price for that error in judgment. The terms are acceptable, Chancellor Mordun said finally, his voice hollow with defeat.
But, know this, human. The Empire remembers its enemies.
Cross smiled, and, for a moment, the Baba Yaga was visible beneath the diplomatic facade.
Chancellor, I'm counting on it.
Because now you know exactly what will happen if you threaten humanity again. The revised treaty was signed in the command center, surrounded by the wreckage of Valdorian pride and the smoking remains of their military supremacy. As Cross prepared to leave, General Kretios asked the question that had been burning in his mind.
The Baba Yaga, is it really you?
Cross paused at the doorway, considering his answer. General, the Baba Yaga was a weapon designed to eliminate threats to humanity. Today, I was a diplomat seeking peace through negotiation. The fact that they happen to be the same person should tell you everything you need to know about how seriously Earth takes its diplomatic core. With that, he was gone, leaving behind a shattered empire trying to come to terms with a new galactic order where humanity was no longer the weak, primitive species they had assumed them to be. 3 months after the incident on Zephyria Prime, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy new equilibrium. The Valdorian Empire still existed, but its authority had been fundamentally transformed. Where once they ruled through fear and superior firepower, they now found themselves one power among many in a galactic community that humanity had quietly been reshaping for decades. Ambassador Jonathan Cross stood before the newly formed Galactic Council, representing not just Earth but the dozens of species that had sought humanity's protection after learning what had really happened in the Imperial Palace. His formal diplomatic robes concealed the same dangerous frame, but now everyone in the chamber knew exactly what lay beneath the civilized exterior.
The motion before us today, Cross addressed the assembled delegates, concerns the establishment of mutual defense protocols among member species. No single empire will again be allowed to threaten others with impunity.
The Valdorian delegation, led by a subdued Chancellor Mordun, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Empire's military had been reorganized under galactic oversight, their most aggressive commanders replaced with officers who understood the new reality. They were still formidable, but no longer dominant. What had surprised everyone was how readily other species had embraced the new order. The Nexari Collective, the Zephyrian Trade Federation, even the reclusive crystal mines of Andromeda Prime had emerged from isolation to join what was being called the Terran Alliance. They brought with them technologies, resources, and military assets that had been hidden from the Empire for generations. "The humans did something we never could," whispered Ambassador Veltar of the Nexari to his aide. "They made us believe that resistance was possible." Cross continued his presentation, outlining security protocols that seemed almost mundane until one considered their implications. Standardized communication networks meant no empire could cut off a species from calling for help. Shared intelligence databases ensured that no military buildup could happen in secret. And mutual defense pacts meant that attacking one member meant fighting them all. The real genius of it was that humanity didn't position itself as the galaxy's ruler, but as its protector. Earth's massive fleets remained stationed in deep space, visible to all sensor networks but not threatening any particular world. They were a promise and a warning rolled into one: behave yourselves, and we'll all prosper together. Step out of line, and discover why the Baba Yaga had become a whispered legend across the galaxy. After the council session, Cross found himself approached by General Kritios, who had requested a private meeting. The Valdorian officer looked older, his scales dulled by the stress of commanding an empire in decline. "Ambassador," Kritios began, "I need to ask you something that's been troubling me." Cross nodded, gesturing to a quiet alcove away from the other delegates. "Of course, General. The intelligence networks you compromised, the hidden fleets, the industrial facilities disguised as mining colonies, how long had humanity been planning this?" Cross considered the question carefully. "General, would you like the diplomatic answer or the truth?" "The truth. I think I've earned that much." 150 years, Cross replied. "Ever since we developed faster-than-light communication and realized we weren't alone in the universe." Kritios absorbed this, his tactical mind working through the implications. "You've been watching us since before the Empire conquered half the galaxy." "We've been watching everyone," Cross confirmed. "The moment we realized that interstellar civilization was dominated by predatory empires, we began preparing for the day when one of them would threaten Earth." He gestured toward the main chamber where delegates from dozens of species were hammering out trade agreements and defense pacts. The mining colonies, the observation posts, the hidden shipyards, they were all part of a defensive strategy. But so was this. This? Building a galaxy where empires like yours couldn't exist, Cross explained. Every species we contacted in secret, every rebel group we armed, every economic pressure we applied, it was all designed to create a situation where peaceful cooperation would be more profitable than conquest. General Kritios stared at the human diplomat with something approaching respect. "You weaponized diplomacy itself." Cross smiled. "We weaponized everything, General. The difference is that we prefer to win through negotiation rather than violence. It's more efficient, and the results last longer." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication from the council chamber. A new crisis was developing in the Outer Rim, where the Hive Collective had begun aggressive expansion into neutral space. Their bioships were overwhelming local defenses, and several species were calling for immediate military intervention. Cross and Kritios returned to the chamber, where panic was beginning to spread among the delegates. The Hive Collective was unlike any other threat they'd faced, a species-consuming swarm that converted entire populations into biological resources for their expansion. Traditional diplomacy was impossible with creatures that saw other sentients as raw materials. The Collective's expansion rate suggests they'll reach the Terran Alliance border within 6 months, reported Admiral Chen of Earth's Deep Space Command via holographic link. Their biotechnology is adapting faster than our current projections indicated.
Chancellor Mordun rose to address the assembly. The Empire's fleets are still intact, Ambassador Cross.
Perhaps it's time to combine our forces against a threat that endangers all civilization. It was a moment that would have been unthinkable months earlier, the Valdorian Empire offering to fight alongside humanity against a common enemy. But Cross recognized it for what it really was, the first test of whether the new galactic order could actually function when faced with an existential threat.
Admiral Chen, Cross addressed the hologram, "What's the status of the Outer Rim defense platforms?" "Operational and ready for combat deployment," came the reply. "But, Ambassador, those installations were designed for Empire-level threats.
The Collective's adaptive biology might pose unique challenges."
Cross turned to the assembled delegates. "Then, we'll need more than just human technology to stop them." What followed was unprecedented in galactic history.
Species that had been enemies for centuries began pooling their scientific knowledge and military resources.
The Nexary's phase shift technology combined with Valdorian plasma weapons and human AI systems to create entirely new classes of defensive systems.
The crystal mines provided computational power that could predict collective adaptation patterns, while the Trade Federation's merchant networks became supply lines for the largest military mobilization the galaxy had ever seen. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Sarah Chen, Admiral Chen's daughter and one of Earth's foremost xenobiologists, had been studying captured collective specimens.
Her findings would revolutionize their understanding of the enemy.
The hive isn't just expanding randomly, she explained to the emergency council session.
They're following specific biological imperatives, seeking genetic diversity to incorporate into their collective genome. If we could predict which species they'll target next,
we could evacuate civilian populations and prepare ambush points, finished General Kretios, his military experience translating the scientific discovery into tactical advantage.
Cross nodded approvingly. "Doctor, how quickly can you develop a predictive model?" "With the crystal mine's computational assistance?" 72 hours.
The next 3 days saw the galaxy's greatest minds working together toward a common goal.
Human strategists collaborated with Valdorian fleet commanders. Nexary engineers shared technology with species they'd been at war with for generations.
And, through it all, Cross found himself coordinating not just military operations, but the birth of something unprecedented, a truly unified galactic civilization.
When the Hive Collective's next wave of expansion began, they found prepared resistance at every turn.
Civilian populations had been evacuated to protected worlds. Combined fleets with previously unimaginable firepower waited in carefully prepared positions. And, for the first time in their species' history, the Collective's bioships encountered technology that could adapt faster than they could. The war lasted 6 months and ended with the Collective's complete withdrawal to the galactic rim. They had encountered something they couldn't consume or adapt to, cooperation on a scale that transcended individual species' limitations. In the aftermath, as the galaxy celebrated its first true victory over an existential threat, Ambassador Jonathan Cross found himself reflecting on how far they'd all come. The Valdorian Empire had evolved from galactic predator to protector.
Former enemies had become allies.
And humanity had achieved its ultimate diplomatic goal, a galaxy where force was unnecessary because cooperation was more powerful. General Kretios approached him one final time as the victory celebrations continued around them.
"Ambassador, I have one last question." "What's that, General?" "The Baba Yaga, was he always meant to become a diplomat?"
Cross considered this, watching a species that had been at war for millennia work together to rebuild worlds damaged by the Collective.
"General, the Baba Yaga was created to eliminate threats to humanity."
But the greatest threat to any civilization isn't external enemies, it's the failure to grow beyond violence as a solution to problems. He gestured to the celebration around them, where Valdorian officers shared drinks with human captains, and Nexari engineers compared notes with crystal mind mathematicians. Perhaps the Baba Yaga's greatest mission was always to eliminate himself by creating a galaxy where monsters like him weren't necessary. As if to prove his point, a group of young officers from a dozen different species approached, requesting his assistance with establishing a joint military academy. They called him Ambassador Cross, not the Baba Yaga, and they looked to him not with fear but with respect. The monster was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous to the galaxy's old order, a diplomat who had proven that peace backed by strength was the ultimate weapon. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as humanity had planned it.